Okay, so this quick video is going to be about some kind of hacky solutions, some quick wins and some kind of underhand tactics will get you results. If you're in a kind of desperate situation where you feel like you either can't cut down the actual resources anymore, or there are some kind of blockers that are just not viable to get around, there are some sort of not ideal, kind of not recommended techniques that will at least improve your performance somewhat. The standard one, which is kind of quite an old technique now, is about changing the media type on your CSS. So we've covered before that CSS goes at the top because it's render blocking, because it's going to need to work out all your style rules so it knows how to lay out the content that's then defined further down. But if you set the media type to be print, it will overlook this. It will defer it, load up the content, and then deal with that later. So you could put your CSS to be a print style sheet and then put like an onload method to change the media type to screen. This way it will skip it, go down, load all your content up, and then come back and then load up your CSS. If you just have 100 kilobytes of CSS across your whole application and you have no idea what pages they're used on or whatever, so you just have to load it on the home page, you could try to just segment the essential stuff you need for that initial render. So your initial, big background image, your form, whatever the thing is, and then just the rest of the styles can come in whenever. So you kind of, nobody will notice that big jolt even though it's happening on the page. This means you don't need to load an external resource. You don't have to go off to a server again, get another file, come back, and you can just basically load that in line. It means you can start loading things up quicker. This is kind of quite messy, just because you're now going to have to keep track of a particular block of CSS and make sure it always stays in sync, because you're probably going to have to make the same CSS in your main CSS file and kind of keep the two matching. A lot of visual checking, and it's probably not very maintainable like over long periods of time, but it will probably improve your performance score. If you have a large image, and we sort of covered this in the previous video about Google metrics, is if you have like a big image, you can instead kind of initially load up let's say a block of color or an SVG. You could even just kind of make a much smaller version of the image. You could say that the image you're loading on your homepage is a big banner that's like 1500 pixels wide, and it's going to be like a 1.8 megabyte file. Yeah, it looks fantastic, but it means that 60% of your users never get to see it because they've scrolled past it by the time it's loaded. So maybe you make a version that's like 400 pixels wide, a much smaller image, and you add like a soft blur on it. When it gets scaled up and you just put that in place, what you'll just get is that kind of a big stretched blurry image. It depends on the image, but it can look kind of fine. And obviously, again, you set an onload that will replace the image. So that means it can quickly paint the page, quickly tells the user that the site is ready to start using. And then if they're quick enough, if they've got a strong enough connection, they'll barely notice that the image is then loaded and replaced, and it will look like there's a brief second of it being blurry. But it means that slow users will still get more or less the same website. They're probably not that fussed anyway, and they can quickly start using the site anyway. And the other question is fonts. Fonts cause a lot of problems just because of, again, they have to go off making these external requests. Usually your fonts aren't local, so you have to go off to some kind of Google place to get these fonts. And obviously all the content on your page is then affected by this, so it has to re-render and rebuild everything. It's a real discussion to have with your designers, but you might be able to not use whatever the custom font is on your critical page. If you have a landing page that you really just need this thing to be super snappy and big, and they're using like an open sans, so it's like a nice clean text font, and you go like, yeah, but we could use Arial and we'd save 200 milliseconds on that load. How many users, how much is that going to really affect the actual click-through rate of your whatever it is you're trying to get? Again, it's a trade-off, but you can obviously, with standard default fonts, certainly for the body text, you can probably just kind of get away with that. Maybe once you log in and it's less important for SEO, then you can do what you like. But those critical pages, and certainly for mobile use, where they're seeing a much smaller version of your site, maybe they're not that fussed. And then if you've got like a particularly stylized font, something kind of quite clever, you might not be able to get around it, but again, maybe you can bake that into an image or an SVG or something, so it just means you're not going to have to make all these external requests. I mean, really, JavaScript is a problem. We're kind of looking at more like CSS solutions, but like you might just find there's so many stages to it, having to load these files and parse it and make sense of the rules and then attach all these events and DOM elements and so on, that like JavaScript will largely be a big hold up on your page. You have to try and think about what are the trade-offs for something. So if you're using a React, Angular, something like that, and it has to build this big bundle for the application, even if it's kind of code split and it's going to be just like 50 kilobytes of JavaScript on your page or whatever, if you can get away with not doing that, that's better. So home pages are often very light. Sometimes they kind of just are showcases. They just have like fancy images about what this company does, what this product does, and you're trying to get them to click through to then the sign up form or to do something. It's just about kind of, I guess it's about meeting with the design, but like you might be able to get away with that initial load having no JavaScript at all. HTML and CSS gives you a lovely, beautiful view. You can even do some animations, transitions, make something very pleasant. And then the user has to interact in some way. They have to click something or enter into a form or do something to suddenly trigger some actual functionality. It could be that clicking then takes them through to another page, but it means that they've already loaded up, they've already started passing the resources. It means you're going to score really high in terms of your performance, and then you can kind of defer all that JavaScript to somewhere else when they actually get down to the business of doing something functional. Just trying to boot off those things, or even implement like, you know, again, a 2 kilobyte kind of hand-coded JavaScript solution to the big like React app that you were previously doing for that one page might just solve a lot of problems for you. Again, these are kind of sneaky and they're not necessarily recommended, and there are a lot more kind of underhand things. They come with a trade-off, obviously. You're gonna probably suffer for these, or you might run into unexpected problems because what you're doing is kind of not best practice, but they probably will get you results in that you kind of, the scores will suggest your website is loading quicker, it's painting quicker, it's usable, and it's kind of more pleasant and easy to use. The trade-off is it kind of won't have this lovely package process of how it rolls out and works on every page the same. You're doing some very kind of tailored niche solutions, and those have to be kind of very manually maintained. I'd love to know any other ones. If people have any kind of good suggestions of these kind of sneaky techniques, because it's quite a gamified thing. Once you kind of start doing a few, you're kind of looking for new ways to kind of reduce those numbers and then get faster loads. But yeah, that's all. Go have a lovely day.